We all remember the scene. In the center of a futuristic theme park, a great white shark hangs helplessly from a cable. The water below is calm, a mirror of turquoise silence. Then, the surface explodes. A behemoth rises from the depths, a creature so colossal that the shark looks like a mere goldfish in its jaws. It snaps its mouth shut, water cascading off its armored hide, and drags its meal back into the abyss. That creature was Mosasaurus. For millions of moviegoers, it was the definition of a sea monster. But the Hollywood version, as terrifying as it was, barely scratched the surface of the truth. The real Mosasaurus was not a dinosaur. It was not a crocodile. It was a lizard. It was a 50-foot biological nightmare related to the modern Komodo dragon, but adapted for a life of total aquatic dominance. It possessed a second set of teeth, hidden on the roof of its mouth, designed to ratchet prey down its throat. It conquered the world's oceans faster and more ruthlessly than any predator before or since. The Tyrannosaurus rex may have been the king of the land, but even the king knew better than to go for a swim when the Mosasaurus was hungry. The story of the Mosasaurus begins long before the word dinosaur was even invented. It begins in the candlelit mines of the Netherlands in the late 18th century. In 1764, limestone miners deep beneath the city of Maastricht uncovered a skull. It was massive, terrifying, and utterly unlike anything living in the known world. A few years later, in 1780, a second, even larger skull was found. It became an instant sensation, known locally as the Great Animal of Maastricht. At the time, science was still grappling with the concept of extinction. The idea that God would allow one of his creations to vanish was considered heretical. Scholars tried to fit this monster into the known order of nature. Some said it was a whale. Others argued it was a crocodile. A few desperate souls claimed it was merely a very large fish. It was the French anatomist Georges Cuvier, the father of paleontology, who finally unlocked the truth. He examined the skull and realized that its structure was fundamentally different from a mammal or a crocodile. He declared that this was a giant marine lizard, a creature related to the monitors and iguanas we see today. This was a revolutionary moment. Cuvier used the Mosasaurus to prove to the world that the Earth had once been ruled by giant reptiles that were now extinct. Before we knew about the T-Rex, before we knew about the Triceratops, it was the Mosasaurus that taught humanity that monsters were real. It was named Mosasaurus hoffmanni, meaning the lizard of the Meuse River, honoring the river near where it was found. To understand the sheer power of the Mosasaurus, we must look at its evolutionary timeline. Most dominant lineages take tens of millions of years to rise to the top. The mosasaurs did it in a blink of a geological eye. In the early Cretaceous period, the ancestors of the Mosasaurus were small, semi-aquatic lizards, called agialosaurs. They looked like monitor lizards that enjoyed swimming. They lived on the margins, hunting small fish in the shallows. But then, an opportunity arose. The oceans of the mid-Cretaceous were hit by an extinction event that wiped out the ruling ichthyosaurs and severely reduced the population of the plesiosaurs. The top spot in the food chain was vacant. The mosasaurs seized this vacuum with terrifying speed. In a span of less than 20 million years, they went from 3-foot shoreline dwellers to 50-foot leviathans. They radiated into every niche of the ocean. Some evolved to crush clams. Some evolved to hunt deep-water squid. And the lineage of Mosasaurus evolved to eat everything else. This rapid ascent is a testament to the adaptability of the squamate body plan. Squamates are the group that includes lizards and snakes. They possess a flexible, kinetic skull and a metabolism that allows for bursts of extreme activity. When nature took this design and supersized it, it created a predator that was more efficient, more agile, and more dangerous than the marine reptiles that had come before. The Mosasaurus was built for violence. An adult Mosasaurus hoffmanii could reach lengths of up to 17 meters, or 56 feet. It weighed as much as a modern humpback whale, but it was not a gentle filter feeder. It was a hyper-carnivore. For decades, artists drew Mosasaurus as a sea serpent, a creature with a fringed back and a long, trailing tail that rippled like an eel. This image made it look majestic, but slow. Modern science has corrected this picture, turning the majesty into menace. A landmark discovery in 2013 revealed soft tissue impressions of a mosasaur tail. It did not taper to a point. Instead, it bent downwards and supported a large, two-lobed tail fluke, remarkably similar to the tail of an inverted shark. This changes everything. A tail fluke indicates that Mosasaurus was a high-performance swimmer. It did not undulate lazily. It powered through the water with stiff, efficient strokes of its tail, capable of explosive acceleration. It was an ambush predator that could run down the fastest fish in the sea. Its skin was equally specialized. Fossilized scales show that Mosasaurus had keeled scales, similar to those of a shark. These scales reduced drag and allowed water to flow smoothly over its body, making it a silent, hydrodynamic missile. But the true horror lay inside the mouth. The jaws of a Mosasaurus were lined with massive, conical teeth designed for piercing and crushing. But if you were to look past that first row of teeth into the black cavern of its throat, you would see a second set. These are called Pterygoid teeth. They sit on a separate set of bones on the roof of the mouth. In Mosasaurus, these teeth were recurved, hooking backward like the barbs of a fishing hook. This anatomical feature solved a major problem for aquatic predators. Without hands to hold prey, how do you swallow a struggling, slippery shark or a thrashing marine reptile without it escaping? The Mosasaurus used its pterygoid teeth as a ratchet. The main jaws would clamp down to hold the victim. Then, the inner jaws would detach and lunge forward, sinking their hooks into the flesh. They would then pull back, dragging the prey deeper into the throat. The main jaws would then open and bite down again, and the cycle would repeat. It was a biological conveyor belt of death. Once a victim was caught in the throat of a Mosasaurus, there was no escape. The only direction was down. The world inhabited by Mosasaurus was known as the Western Interior Seaway. It was a massive, shallow inland sea that split North America in two, connecting the Arctic Ocean to the Gulf of Mexico. This body of water was warm, teeming with life, and arguably the most dangerous ecosystem in the history of the planet. It was an environment of giants. The Mosasaurus shared these waters with Xiphactinus, a predatory fish that grew to 20 feet long and looked like a bulldog crossed with a piranha. It swam alongside Elasmosaurus, a plesiosaur with a neck that stretched for 23 feet. There were giant sea turtles like Archelon, which were the size of cars. In any other era, these creatures would have been the apex predators. But in the late Cretaceous, they were all on the menu. We have fossil evidence of the Mosasaurus diet, and it is the definition of indiscriminate. Paleontologists have found the shells of giant turtles that have been crunched in half, bearing the distinct puncture marks of mosasaur teeth. We have found the bones of plesiosaurs in the stomach regions of mosasaur skeletons, but perhaps the most impressive prey was the shark. The Cretaceous seas were patrolled by Cretoxyrhina, also known as the Ginsu shark. This was a shark comparable in size to a great white, a formidable killer in its own right. Yet, We have found fossils of Cretoxarina vertebrae that have been snapped by the massive jaws of a Mosasaurus. The shark, the eternal symbol of ocean dominance, was reduced to a snack for the giant lizard. However, the most dangerous enemy a Mosasaurus faced was usually another Mosasaurus. These animals were highly territorial and aggressive. We have numerous skulls that show signs of brutal combat. One famous specimen shows the tip of a mosasaur tooth embedded deep in the bone of another mosasaur's skull. The bone had healed around the tooth, indicating that the victim survived the fight and lived with the souvenir of the battle for years. They fought over mating rights, over hunting grounds, and perhaps simply because they were the only things large enough to challenge one another. It was a cannibalistic society where the weak were eaten by the strong. One of the key adaptations that allowed the Mosasaurus to sever its ties with the land completely was its method of reproduction. Sea turtles, despite living in the ocean, are tethered to the land. They must drag themselves onto beaches to lay eggs. This makes the adults vulnerable, and the hatchlings essentially helpless food for birds and crabs. The ancestral mosasaurs realized that to truly conquer the sea, they had to abandon the egg. Mosasaurus was viviparous. It gave birth to live young at sea. This was a momentous evolutionary shift. It meant a 50-foot female did not need to haul her massive bulk onto a beach, where she would be crushed by her own weight. She could remain in the water, supported by buoyancy. However, this also created a unique vulnerability. A Mosasaurus gave birth in the open ocean, or perhaps in sheltered lagoons. The moment the baby was born, it was swimming in the same water as the predators that wanted to eat it. And in the Cretaceous, everything wanted to eat a baby mosasaur. Sharks, fish, birds, and even other mosasaurs would have targeted the young. To survive, a baby Mosasaurus had to be born ready to kill. They grew at an explosive rate, fueled by a metabolism that ran hot. They had to reach a size refuge quickly, growing large enough that the list of potential predators shrank to zero. The life of a Mosasaurus began in a sprint for survival and ended as an unchallengeable reign of terror. While Mosasaurus hoffmanni was the largest and most famous, it was not the only monster in the sea. The family Mosasauridae was diverse, and different species carved out different empires. There was Tylosaurus, a sleek ramming specialist that dominated the earlier stages of the seaway. It used its reinforced snout to smash into prey like a torpedo. There was Prognathodon, a heavy-jawed crusher that specialized in eating hard-shelled prey like ammonites and turtles. There was Globidens, a strange specialist with round, globe-like teeth designed exclusively for crushing clams. But Mosasaurus hoffmanni represented the pinnacle of the lineage. It combined the crushing power of Prognathodon with the cutting ability of the earlier forms. It was the ultimate generalist. It didn't need to specialize because its sheer size and power allowed it to handle anything. It lived at the very end of the Cretaceous period. By this time, the great ichthyosaurs were long dead. The plesiosaurs were declining. The Mosasaurus had effectively won the game of marine evolution. It had eliminated or outcompeted all rivals. It stood at the absolute zenith of its power. The ruler of a global empire that stretched from Europe to North America to Antarctica. The tragedy of the Mosasaurus is that it did not decline. It did not fade away due to competition or climate change. It was murdered at its peak. 66 million years ago, the Chicxulub asteroid struck the Earth. We often focus on what this did to the dinosaurs on land, the firestorms, the nuclear winter, the starvation. But the impact on the ocean was equally catastrophic. The asteroid hit a shallow sea. The energy transferred into the water generated tsunamis kilometers high that scoured the coastlines of the world. But the long-term killer was the collapse of the food web. The dust and soot blocked out the sun. Without sunlight, the phytoplankton, the microscopic plants that form the base of the ocean food chain, died. When the plankton died, the zooplankton starved. Then the small fish starved. Then the ammonites starved. The collapse rippled upward. The sharks died. The plesiosaurs died. And sitting at the very top of this pyramid, requiring massive amounts of calories to sustain its 50-foot body, was the Mosasaurus. It was the most vulnerable animal on the planet to this specific type of catastrophe. An apex predator cannot exist without a base to support it. The Mosasaurus starved. The specialized teeth, the shark-like tail, the keen senses, none of it mattered when the ocean became a tomb. Within a few thousand years of the impact, the mosasaurs were gone. The lineage that had gone from lizard to leviathan in record time was extinguished. The oceans were left empty of giants, creating a void that would remain unfilled for millions of years until the whales finally returned to the water to take the throne that the lizards had left behind. The legacy of the Mosasaurus is not just in its size, but in what it represents. It is the ultimate example of nature's ambition. It proves that with the right opportunity, even a humble lizard can rise to become a god. It reminds us that the ocean is a battlefield where the rules are constantly being rewritten. The Mosasaurus was the greatest experiment in marine reptilian evolution, a creature so perfectly adapted to its world that only a rock from space could dethrone it. So, the next time you look out at the ocean, remember that beneath those waves, monsters once ruled. And somewhere in the DNA of the monitor lizard basking on a rock today, the ghost of the Leviathan still sleeps, waiting for the tide to turn again. If you enjoyed diving into the history of the real king of the ocean, be sure to subscribe to Extinct Echoes. We bring the monsters back to life. And let us know in the comments, in a battle for the deep, who is your money on? The crushing jaws of the Mosasaurus or the speed and size of the Megalodon?